Good evening. I am reconvening the meeting of the Maricopa Community College District Governing Board for October 22nd, 2013. Let's see. Mr. Lund, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to announce substitutes for the CEC. Ms. Susie Polito is substituting tonight for Dr. Jean Giovannini. Welcome to the meeting. I have, let's see, the next is the student life reports. Wait. Actually, I have a welcome. Dr. Maria Hesse, former president at Chandler Gilbert Community College, is teaching a higher education class at ASU on community colleges, and she has a class here, so I'd like to recognize this group. And we hope you all come and teach for us. The next item on the agenda is Student Life Reports, GCC's Student Leadership Forum, Ms. Connie Greenwell.
Good evening, President Burke, governing board members, Dr. Glasper, Dr. Kola, members of the CEC, and all other presents here tonight. Thank you for providing this opportunity for Glendale Community College to present the following topics. My name is Wendy Raspardo, and I am the Associated Student Government President. Glendale Community College hosts many diverse events. One such event is our week-long series of activities and presentations entitled Civility Week. During this week, students, faculty, staff, and the community at large will have the opportunity to participate in activities to aid in the development of awareness of the functions and practices of a civil society. We are doing this by providing learning and knowledge presentations to enhance understanding of a respectful, honest, just, fair, and inclusive community. Within Civility Week, Glendale Community College will be hosting 20 in-person sessions with integrated assignments, a video competition, a democracy plaza, and a community service fair. I would like to introduce Anthony Buddy Lee, our Vice President of Associated Student Government. Before he comes up though, we brought our blue bracelets, and they say, "I choose civility." We brought them so that everybody could have one. They're outside. If anybody missed it, they're still there. So, Buddy?
Hey.
We're looking to become more sustainable at Glendale Community College. In our efforts, we purchased Igloo water dispensers to help eliminate plastic water bottle use during our student activities. Also, we purchased refill stations so that students with reusable water bottles will be able to fill these up at any time during the day at anywhere we had placed these. We placed these in high traffic student areas such as our student union and fitness center. This, along with recycling bins around campus, is a conglomerate effort by our students, our faculty and staff to help make GCC more sustainable, to also help reduce our waste, and in turn will increase in our reuse and recycle rate at Glendale Community College every day. I will now introduce our Treasurer of Associated Student Government, Pauline Garcia.
I'm going to touch upon Glendale's new student orientation, those of which all of our executive officer team and other student leaders on our campus participate in. These informational and interactive sessions provide incoming students information on campus resources, important district initiatives such as the universal smoking ban, and invaluable insight into how they as college students can be successful in their academics and in their community. One of the most crucial components of our involvement is the after presentation student-led campus tour, which allows breaking away into smaller groups where our peers are able to communicate with us one-on-one to ask questions and gain further insight into our own personal experiences as students of Glendale Community College. This year we held 25 orientation, over 2,000 incoming students, and proudly represented the student dynamic. Now I would like to introduce our secretary, Becky Velez.
This Wednesday, October 23rd, the Human Library event is taking place at Glendale Community College. The Human Library is made up of 3 components: a human book, a human reader, and a library space in which these books and readers can gather and have conversations. During this event, students are able to check out a human book, and these books are people from all walks of life that have come in to tell their story. Many of these books have experienced injustice, discrimination, and other hardships in their life. The Human Library event is a unique civic learning opportunity for students that brings great value to our campus. I would now like to introduce Rico Moran, our Public Relations Officer.
Good evening. As my fellow colleagues have mentioned GCC's top events, I would like to impress on the amount of student involvement on Glendale Community College's campuses today. From serving on planning committees to helping facilitate events, students have become an essential part of our campus life. We have seen a large increase in club activities and participation. With over 60 clubs now actively participating on our campus, we are leading onto a path where we are allowing our student leaders to facilitate their own workshops and to host their own leadership conferences. Where we are going to invite our sister colleges, community members, and we will host multi-system colleges events. I would like to give thanks for you guys for demonstrating that our students remain the top priority and allowed us to speak here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome job. I've gone to that human library, and it is so fascinating to sit there and listen to people. So much more fun than a book, too.
Those are great programs. This is a wonderful presentation. We appreciate your coming and sharing with us. The next item on the agenda is Emeritus Awards and Recognitions, and we have one from Dr. Linda Lujan.
May I approach the podium?
Yes, please.
And for our first, I'm also asking Vice President Dr. Bill Guerrero to join me. He is our Vice President for Academic Affairs. President Burke, board members, Chancellor Glasper, CEC members, and guests. It is my great privilege to recognize 2 of our distinguished emeriti this evening. One was actually recognized last month, but because of travel plans, she was unable to be here, so she is here to speak with you briefly this month. I also think it's very fitting that Dr. Hesse is with us this evening, as are a number of Chandler Gilbert friends and colleagues. I was at a meeting today with Mrs. Linda Rosenthal, who said, "You can't be old enough to have people eligible for emeritus status," to which I reminded her we started offering classes in 1985. And both of these individuals, we were, Sean, part of your college at that time, 1992, we were accredited. But both of these individuals who we're recognizing this evening are part of the rich and growing history of Chandler Gilbert Community College. So for the first, I would like to ask Dr. Guerrero to say a few words.
I'd like to introduce to you this evening Dr. Brenda Larson, who's being recognized for Faculty Emeritus distinction. Dr. Larson has been an integral part of Chandler Gilbert Community College's growth and expansion since its inception as an institution. Originally hired to teach office automation systems, business personal computers, and computer information systems, Brenda modeled the way for faculty professional growth by earning 2 master's and a doctoral degree. She helped pioneer a business and teacher education learning community at Chandler Gilbert's Williams campus and was instrumental in launching the college's successful teacher education curriculum. Throughout her 26-plus years of service to Chandler Gilbert Community College and the district, Brenda remained active in a wide range of college and community activities. She served on countless college committees and advisory boards and maintained partnerships with K-12 and higher education partners, including the Colleges of Education at Arizona State University and Northern Arizona University. During her last year of service, she was chair of the Social and Behavioral Sciences Division. Brenda was known for impeccable organization and presentation of course materials and served as an exemplar for thousands of future teachers. Congratulations, Brenda.
I wanted to thank you very much for this honor and privilege. 26 years with Maricopa has been wonderful. I think the thing that I like most is the professional growth that's been made available. And as Bill mentioned, I was involved in service learning and collaborative learning and learning communities. I've gone to brain research conferences. And Maricopa, I think, does an amazing job of helping people stay current. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to invite former Provost John Schroeder to join us, please. John came to Chandler Gilbert in 1990, before we were accredited, to start the aviation maintenance technology program along with colleagues, or were you a solo?
Along with college.
And he tells great stories about his early days at the college. Someday you'll have to invite him out to share those stories with you.
Don't believe him.
He reinvented himself by moving to the district for a period of time to offer support and service to our IT department. And then as Chandler Gilbert was growing, he accepted an assignment as provost of the Williams campus. And I will tell you that every inch of the Williams campus says John Schroeder. He was a part of all of the new development, the redevelopment of existing buildings. And to this day, when we walk through the halls and see the aviation history there, that's a tribute to his efforts to preserve the linkage to the former base and to our future of education. You have his bio there in front of you. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm just going to tell you that I learned so much working with Mr. Schroeder, and I miss him every single day, and I wish him well as he travels the Alaskan-Canadian Highway up to Anchorage
We did.
and shows up back in Arizona periodically. Congratulations, John.
I want to echo what Brenda said about the professional growth. I had a wonderful time our years in Maricopa and the opportunity to do a number of widely varied jobs, but had a chance to impact the students and the organization and the community, and for that, I thank you.
We appreciate your professionalism and your contribution both to Chandler Gilbert and to Maricopa District. You helped make this a great district, and we appreciate your contributions. The next item is the 2013 ACCT Trustee Leadership Award. Dr. Rufus Glasper.
Mr. Chair, I would like to take the podium, please.
Please.
Would like to ask Dr. Don Campbell if he would join me at the podium. Thank you. Would you be seated, please? This is my honor tonight. I would like to congratulate Dr. Don Campbell for receiving the Association of Community Colleges Trustees Regional Award for Trustee Leadership. Don, a graduate of Phoenix College, who went on to complete his doctorate, was elected to the board in 1982 and served 29 years before retiring in 2012. Don was the first and to date the only African American board member and worked tirelessly as an advocate for quality education and access for all. Despite devastating challenges, including being orphaned at age 12 and the untimely early deaths of his two beloved sons, Dr. Campbell courageously refused to accept defeat and completed his doctorate, served his country proudly in the armed forces, and spent a lifetime inspiring others to succeed. Don continues to give unceasingly of his time, and the many communities he serves know him well. Don is currently working with 7th and 8th grade, primarily Hispanic and African American boys, after they are out of school, to let them know how important they are and to help them develop life goals. Dr. Campbell's life, his dedication to his family, his drive to give back, to care about each and every individual, and his unwavering promise of education as the great equalizer is a testament to his commitment to underserved and underrepresented populations. I am proud to share with this honor with Dr. Don Campbell, and this was received in Seattle as the regional award winner as a trustee leadership. Dr. Campbell.
Dr. Glasper indicated to me that I'd have to make a few comments. And normally my comments run about 2 hours. Is everybody here can handle that? No, I probably would have gone to Seattle to receive this, but my wife had had a heart attack in July, and there was only 2 of us, so I had to stay home and take care of her. She did get the surgery, and she's recuperating from that. But she still has other problems, and she can't drive anymore, and she cannot, she's still in wheelchairs. So I've spent a lot of my time with her, and even though I work with this youth program. But Dr. Glassman already indicated that I had been to Phoenix College, and at that time that was the only community college in the district. But I don't know whether we had 1,000 students or 500 students, but I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the 29 years here on the Community College Board. And I hope that you continue to grow and increase the number of students as well as the number of colleges. And it wouldn't surprise me that someday you'll look up and see some of your community colleges are now universities, because times do change, so you have to accept that as well. But anyway, congratulations, thank you very much. And I'll see if I can sell this.
Dr. Campbell served during the years of great growth in this district. He was a reasonable voice all those years and a strong supporter of the community college in Maricopa County. We appreciate your effort and your contribution, Dr. Campbell. The next item on the agenda is the citizens interim, and I have no requests to speak, so we will go to the agenda. Let's see, before I ask for an approval of the order of the agenda, I'd like to remove an item, 7A, the response to citizen resolution requests. We will deal with that in November. Is there any other item that we need to remove from the agenda?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I would like to remove, and I don't have the agenda up yet, but it is the board policy. I would like to put it onto have it placed on the November agenda after it be added to the work session in November. We don't have a study session in November, do we?
We have
The retreat?
the monitoring retreat.
The board policy, what number is that?
I'm still looking.
The policy manual?
Yes, not the, well.
It's
the board-
5. It's 5A,
Yeah, 5A.
consideration of non-consent action.
Yes. I would appreciate it if that could be then placed on an agenda in the future, please.
I'm going to take each of the requests, 5A and 7A, and I'm going to ask you to vote on whether to remove those. All of those in favor of removing 7A, would you
And I need
indicate?
to remove, I amended your motion, so, because you asked if there were any others. So
Yes.
it wasn't an addition.
Yes.
And if we're going to vote on them separately, then I will have to remove mine. It is completed.
I did not make a motion, I just asked to remove one. I'm asking us to vote on these because I'm not sure we want to move that, the board policy revisions to next month. So I'm going to ask the board to vote on that.
What was the second?
Well, then I'm ready for a discussion that will be a lengthy one.
Well, are we removing two on the same vote? No.
No.
Okay.
Are you agreed to remove 7A, the response to citizen resolution
Right.
requests?
Well, but if you're going to do this in a vote, then I have to remove mine. If you're going to vote on them separately, it has to be then brought
Yes.
to the board's attention separately. So
Yes,
I-
that's what I'm doing. Okay? Those of you who approve of removing 7A, would you say aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Motion carries. There's a request to remove 5A, approval of proposed MCCD board policy revisions. Is there a discussion on that?
Yes, sir. The board policy revisions that, and the different amendments that have been put on the board agenda had one more meeting to go over and discuss, and that meeting was canceled. And in that meeting, for the meeting that was canceled, I had prepared several points of concern, questions, and things that needed to be addressed. I also felt that there had been previous conversations within the minutes that I did not feel had been addressed, but had kind of been rushed over. And so if we want to have that discussion tonight, I am more than willing to have that discussion and go through the board policy revisions point by point this evening. If we aren't going to have that discussion and would prefer to do it in a work session to replace the meeting that was canceled earlier this month, for doing so, then whichever, but if it's voted to leave it on the agenda, then I'll discuss it further when it comes to it, and we'll go through the policy board policy point by point and raise the concerns that I was not given the opportunity due to the cancellation of the meeting that was on our agenda, on our calendar.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of removing 5A from the agenda, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no? No? It's a 3-2 vote. We will have that discussion then during the agenda. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Mr. Sarr moves.
Second?
Mr. Lum seconds a motion to approve the agenda as revised, yes. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no?
No?
Okay, motion carries. The non-consent agenda, I will entertain a motion to approve the non-consent agenda. It's,
The
oh, no, yes, the non-consent agenda.
The regular agenda?
We did the agenda. We just voted on the agenda.
We did the consent agenda.
No. We just voted to approve the agenda.
The order of the agenda.
Right. The next is the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove any items from the consent agenda? Ms. Pearson, I think you want to remove an item for discussion.
It's on the regular agenda.
Oh,
It's voted
okay.
down. So we're going to have a lengthy discussion tonight.
Oh, I see, got it, yes. My mistake, all right. All of those, I need an order, let's see, I entertain an order to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Sarr moves,
Second.
Mr. Lum seconds, a motion to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Under non-consent agenda, the first is 5A. Dr. Glasper.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, item 5A is outcomes, limitations, board staff relations, and governance process. And it is recommended that the governing board adopt the proposed changes to its governance policies. And this is a recommendation that's come after a series of meetings with the governing board, and we've made the necessary adjustments that are included in attachments 1 and 2. And I recommend this for the governing board's approval this evening.
Is there a motion to approve? Mr.
Second.
Sarr moves, Mr. Lum seconds, a motion to approve the MCCCD board policy revisions. Discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
On the, I'm trying to find the minutes and the comments from the emails that were sent. That's why I had this down. Email. Yeah, it wouldn't come up. I hit that.
Here, here.
I don't know, did you all receive the minutes? One of the things that I can bring up before, while we're working on this is that in the governance policy, one of the things that we've discussed and we've even mentioned and said needs to be in the governance policy if we want it to then be something that we measure is dealing with the also work environment and how we want that measured and what we want to do to address that and how we want that measured. Because of the statutory responsibility that we have that specifically states our responsibilities in this field and in this area. And again, there was nothing placed in the board policies that then creates the proper measurements that we should be requiring. There wasn't even discussion. There wasn't even anything in the minutes that reflected an acknowledgement of that statutory responsibility and a vague reference to the statute in the policies. I don't know how to go back and forth. Does not then give us the ability to have them measured. Bottom line is, one of the things that we learned at ACCT was that the board can't measure and hold the district through the chancellor responsible for an expectation or an interpretation if we don't have specific clear language that specifies exactly what that looks like. And as it stands, the language as it even stands in what is allowed for the chancellor to do as an interpretation is basically not measurable and not something that we can even give then responses to his interpretations in the way that he can then go to the problem areas or the mannerisms or the character or lack of integrity that occurs. So without that discussion even, if we don't have the discussion, we can't then come to any kind of agreement on a board. And this is something that's plagued the district for as long as I can remember, because when I was the community college chair at the state legislature, I was getting the same kinds of information, although at that time it was on sexual harassment type things and some other different types of manners of coercion. But the bottom line is that each time it's been, well, there isn't a specific and clear board policy. And so there isn't ever an interpretation. There is then not ever a board's expression in relationship to it, to the situation. And the statute is very clear. It is not vague on this. And I also feel, to another point, that there were also some questions and some concerns that Mr. Lum brought up in some of the minutes. And I did not feel that they were thoroughly vetted and treated with the respect that they needed to be, and information. And there were a lot of times when I would read through the minutes that I would wonder, what was the point? And what was it's a age-old question to ask in these kinds of situations. What are we fixing? What is the problem? What are we fixing? Why? And how does this do it? And so because of these questions and concerns, I would like to go through and then ask, then, what are we fixing? So let's start. With number 1.1b, what are we fixing? What is the problem, and what are we seeing that this then addresses? Well, actually, it starts at 1.0 with the diverse.
Well, the policy revision that we're dealing with tonight allows the employees at the skill centers to be placed under our policy manual. And the second thing we're doing is doing away with the CEC.
No, that's a entire different agenda item. This is the board. This is just the board. And see, the other thing, since this is board policy, we also have board reviews and board evaluations where we evaluate ourselves and each other.
Yes.
And again, those are absolutely worthless in relationship to this board policy.
I'm unclear. I thought we had this. We did not cancel any meeting dealing with this board policy revision, did we?
It was supposed to have been that there was going to be another conversation in a work session, and there was never anything. When I asked about it, it was, we have one more open space, the 1st of October, for a work session. It is on our calendar, and that meeting was never held. And from what I understand, there was never anything given to the chancellor or to staff or anyone to insert it. But the bottom line was, we had a work session scheduled in October, and it was canceled. It was on our calendar, and it was canceled.
No, it wasn't canceled. It was moved to a separate date.
No, that was an agenda review only, not a work session.
Oh, the work session, yes, okay. But the work session did not have identified that topic for discussion, did it?
Not as, it had not been calendared to be that topic.
Yes.
But when I said that, when I inquired about it, then the comment was, we have one more in October, so, and I said, I will be back by then I can participate in this conversation.
Well, I did not get that message, and I don't.
I emailed you, and we did have this conversation.
That was about.
That I wanted that meeting
It
not
was
to be
about,
canceled.
what you wrote me about was the ACCT conference.
Correct.
Yeah.
For a work session, and that I didn't feel it was appropriate to cancel a work session.
Well, but it wasn't about the board policy revision. That was not in your email.
I would like to make a motion that we go back to the approval of the agenda, because I really feel like that this is inappropriate and that we need to have this in a work session discussion, not in a board meeting. and I would
Well,
like
but
to ask again that we go back
Yes.
and take this item off of the agenda and discuss this at a more appropriate meeting.
Well, members of the board have spent a number of hours from the spring and the summer going over the board policy revisions. We've spent a lot of time on this, and we've had ample opportunity to have these discussions. It's not a matter of depriving board members an opportunity to participate. We've done that.
I don't agree with the motion, I agree with the concept, that if you want to look at hostile environment as a policy, I thought we had that, and it is in the manual.
Yeah.
I mean,
But it is not a
how
board
do you
policy, and it
enforce
needs to
that?
be.
But, I mean, I think we have the policy, definitely we have the policy against it as far
But
as
when we
the
had
policy
that
manual.
conversation, they said there is no measurement within to assess the chancellor within the board policy, that we need to do it within the board policy. This was a conversation when we were trying to have the discussion about the horrible PSA mockery to a manual that we have, and we were told that we needed to do it during the board policy
Dr.
discussion.
Glassman?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the conversation we did have, and an adjustment was made in the policy manual under section 2.2, treatment of faculty and staff. And Mrs. Pearson says that the statute is very clear as to how employees should be treated. And the reference that was recommended by the board was that we would insert the language with respect to treatment of faculty and staff, and in compliance with all federal and state laws, chancellor may not cause or allow conditions or procedures that are unfair, unsafe, or undignified. And so, to me, that encompasses all federal laws and all state laws, and those are the measurement bases to evaluate me as to whether or not I allow it to happen or not.
The statute, in the way that I am referencing it, is that we as a board have a statutory responsibility to the work environment, not how it's being portrayed and how you're describing it. I understand that this policy states that you will not be in violation of the law, but the law and the statutes is not what I'm saying is governing us in the way that this is stated. We are governed by statute. This board policy needs to state that based on state statute that puts specific responsibilities on us as a board in relationship to the manner in which HR and employment activities occur and these kinds of practices or whatever practices, that we have a direct responsibility to the work environment as a board. And we as a board take a position about hostile work environments and work environments of coercion and inappropriate conduct. That state statute and that federal statute you're citing has to do with discrimination, has to do with not hostile work environment.
Okay. Can I ask for a clarification? Are you suggesting that the board needs to implement a program in which we investigate hostile?
Not us, how we measure the chancellor based on our statutory responsibilities.
Yes, yes. Well, I believe if we pass the policy, the chancellor gives us his interpretations of how he's going to do that.
Only based on statutory responsibilities according to discrimination. We, as a board, have a different statute that requires us, and we have a direct, ours are very enumerated.
Yes,
And one
well,
is employment.
Okay. It occurs to me that each of the policy manuals outlines ways that employees can redress grievances. And that is particularly the chancellor's responsibility to allow employees to deal with
During
hostile work
that
environment.
conversation, we also discussed our statutory responsibility as a board, and it's not in our policy
Yes.
as a board.
Okay. Ms. Pearson, I don't understand the relationship between statutory responsibility and all of the elements of our policy. What have we missed?
And again, that's why I'm saying this would be better had if we could have this discussion because it is absolutely void and missing in this document.
What
And
is
that's
missing?
inappropriate.
What is
I'd like
missing?
to pass this,
The
and still we can have
statutory-
the discussion. I mean,
But
we can
then
always-
it's passed, and then we go through the same thing we've gone through
everything is
2 years.
everything we revise. I mean, you know.
No, we
But
don't. It's been
think
passed, we're
we
not gonna
put in
revise it. That's
policies
the
because
excuse every time.
When we were discussing and we were reviewing policies, you know, I was reviewing this, and then, to my interpretation, we made the best policy we could. If I'd like to pass this policy, and if you want to bring it up and add.
And I'll be told
to how
we can do
could
it next year, and it'll be the same routine
Well,
again.
I'm willing to set a date, but, you know.
I want us to do exactly what we've learned, like at ACCT, why we spend this money to go, and then we don't do what we need to do, to then give what the chancellor needs to do the job that needs to be done, to have his back, and for us to work as a team with him to address some of the problems that are systemic in this district.
I
me
agree
ask
there's some
Dr.
problems, but I feel that we did the best policy we could, and I've heard a strong commitment from the chancellor of dealing with this issue. I mean,
Dr. Glasper, do you feel that anything's missing in the policy that hinders you from providing a safe work environment?
That's kind of a bad place to put him right here in this kind
Mr.
of a
Chair,
setting.
members of the board, we've discussed this a number of times, and I have stated to the board that I thought that the adjustments that we have made to the policy manual is appropriate. I think in order to address what Mrs. Pearson is asking for in terms of the statutory responsibilities that the board has, another item that still needs to come back to the board is chancellor's interpretations. How do I interpret it, and how will I expect to be measured? And if the board doesn't like the measurements, or if they want to change the measurements to be more specific in regard to their own statutory responsibilities, then they can do that. But the policy, the way it stands today, is appropriate, it's inclusive, and the measurement and limitations can be addressed at that particular point in time. I don't think the policies need to be held up tonight.
In support of what the chancellor said, I'm going to go ahead and rescind my motion, and I will then give the chancellor's interpretations an opportunity to address something that is a cancerous systemic issue and has been for many years and is only getting worse, and have had the idea, I guess mistakenly, that he did not have the ability, based on the backing of the board through our policies and expectations, that he handle it any differently to root it out and eliminate it. But if he feels that this policy gives him that ability, we'll go forward and we'll see what changes occur in the next couple of months.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just simply want to, a couple of things. One is that the statutory requirements of board members and trustees are clearly listed in the Constitution. And those, I think, are intended to address the conduct of board members, their responsibilities to the district. They're not clearly, they don't go into detail. If you read it, they don't go into detail. But I don't think it was intended to be that, because you can't include a policy manual within the statute. So that's the reason why the statute spoke of specific things that board trustees are obligated to follow in terms of the law. Now, regarding the other issue, I think, since I've been on the board, and I've only been on the board this year, one of the things that I think has, the two words that I've seen surface more than anything else have been the words retaliation and hostile environment. And I've heard those repeated over and over again. But I think it's incumbent upon employee organizations to come forward and give us some guidance and give us some exposure to those problems if they exist. And I think there's been ample opportunity to do that, and they haven't surfaced yet. Now, I do believe that we need to revisit that area at some point. And I think as we give this document an opportunity to work, Mr. President, as we give this opportunity, this document, or this policy to work, I think we should make it a specific commitment on part of this board that we're going to revisit this at some point and within a short length of time as these issues arise, because we don't know what the unintended consequences may be. in some of the policies.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Mr. Miranda for that commitment, and I really appreciate it, and I will hold him to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to, I know we're disagreeing on the, how to get it done, but I totally want to thank Ms. Pearson for having the courage to address this issue and take it on herself. I don't want her to feel that she's out there alone and that we're all concerned about it. But how we go about it, we'll work out. But,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
I
Ms.
will
Pearson.
hold you to
Yeah.
that, too.
And I believe the board is one in wanting a safe environment, and we are committed to that, and.
More than safe.
Yeah.
Positive, it's enriching, it's building, it's
Miss-
more than that.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, well, has the board taken action on what they're
No,
going to do
we're
here?
about to.
Okay, I will wait until.
We're in
Okay.
discussion now.
All right, any other discussion?
I again want to just close by saying that we want to be a place of the triple bottom line, where we are the place where people want to invest, taxpayers want to invest through our bonds, through the taxing authority that we have in having respect for us. We want to be the place where people prefer to do business, meaning our students and vendors and things of that nature. And we want to be the place that is preferred to work. And for any successful business, you look at the top 100 businesses in the country to work for, and then you look at the lowest, least preferred companies to work for, and you compare their strategies, you compare their attitudes and their inclusiveness and the shared knowledge and the shared vision and the whole entire concepts of leading at a higher level, and the absence of knowledge being control and power, and all of the different coercive mannerisms. And then you compare it to this district. We are not in the top 100. We are more compared to something a lot less.
I want to take back what I said good about
The bottom line is, we need to look at why it is people are afraid of losing their job. We need to look at what we need to do to increase shared vision, shared knowledge, and encouraging and embracing bringing your brains to work instead of hiding knowledge for power and all of the other coercive measures that are used and employed. And if we can get, and I feel that constitutionally and statutorily, when it says one of our responsibilities is employment, this is exactly why. If you go back and read minutes and discussions throughout the ages as to why these have never been removed, because they were there, and then there was discussion about this not being a board responsibility, it needed to be abdicated, and why that has never been given to us even to have as an abdicating ability, is because they wanted to make sure that people at the lowest level of employment were protected, and that this did not become anybody's entity but the taxpayer's entity, governed by the taxpayer's representatives. So I appreciate the commitments, and I'll look forward to seeing the changes that I think can happen.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the MCCCD board policy revisions, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
All right, motion carries 4-1.
Mr. Burke, members of the board, before you move on, given the board's recent actions, I would like to ask for one other item to be removed from the agenda pending resolution of this issue, and that is the Chancellor's contract on C.2.
Did we vote on that?
I would prefer not. I would just like to pull it from the agenda, because I think it's inappropriate for me to sign a contract or ask the board to approve a contract not knowing what limitations or measurements are going to be made on the Chancellor, subject to interpretation of reading of individual board responsibilities or whatever. And I think it's also important that in a hostile work environment, that the employees have an opportunity or the right to come to the Chancellor rather than to the board. So I want to make sure that these things are clear before I sign a contract.
Mr. Chairman, I would prefer that we go ahead and move forward and vote on this, because the Chancellor's evaluation was from last May to May that just passed. And the contract that we are now voting on is a contract that actually should have been done this summer And so any of this that is coming forward will be part of the evaluation and the process for the next year, nothing to do with the evaluation that then is what solidified or brought to bear the contract that is now being discussed. And this contract needs to be done and put to the back and based on the evaluation that occurred back in May.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, in May, I made the statement to the board that I appreciated the support of the board, but subject to discussion and finalization of the policies that has occurred over the last 18 months. And we spent considerable time this summer going through every page, every paragraph to reach to the point that we are today. To now have it held up means that I need to continue to wait until the board finishes its deliberations. I think it's unfair for me to sign something and then have some potential changes.
Well,
Mr.
I'm
Chair,
unclear.
nothing's being
We passed the
held up.
policy.
Well, you did pass the policy, but you have not passed the interpretations. And the interpretations are part of policy.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Glasper, Mr. Sars recommended that we wait to that item on the agenda, and we will take that up.
Mr. President,
yeah.
can we move that up on the agenda so that we can discuss it now?
Yeah, just amend the agenda and move it up.
Mr. Chair, you can go through the rest of the agenda. I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm fine.
Okay. All right. I'll wait then. We'll go through the
Well,
agenda.
I just need a point of clarification here because I'm not, so what the Chancellor's position is that he would not like his contract up for a vote until after the interpretations have been submitted and approved by the board.
Approved by the board.
Okay, which are consistent, I mean, that he feels are consistent with the policy.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, under business services, the approval of architecture consultant selection for allied health and dental program remodel at 3144 North 7th Avenue, Phoenix, Arizona for Phoenix College. Ms. Thompson?
Mr. President, members of the board, this is to prepare design for a building that the district purchased on behalf of Phoenix College, where it will relocate its allied health and dental programs, and we recommend its approval.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Sarr moves.
Second.
Mr. Lum seconds a motion for the approval of an architecture consultant selection for allied health and dental program remodel at 3144 North 7th Avenue, Phoenix, Arizona for Phoenix College. Any discussion?
Just a question, how long is this process going to take? Just out of curiosity, looking at the end result and where we are in that process now.
President Burt, Board Member Sarr, we hope to move in April of 2015, so that it will take us about a year and a half for the remodel. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The second item under business is the approval of a final guaranteed maximum price contract amendment for the new Performing Arts Center at Estrella Mountain Community College. Ms. Thompson?
Mr. President, members of the board, this is to approve the award of a construction manager at risk contract for the construction of the Performing Arts Center at Estrella Mountain. It's completed its design, and when completed, this facility will be the last of the Performing Arts Centers that the district started bringing on campuses that lack these facilities starting in the 1990s.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move we accept this item.
Mr. Lum moves, Mr. Miranda seconds a motion to approve the final guaranteed maximum price contract amendment for the new Performing Arts Center at Estrella Mountain Community College. Is there discussion?
Sure. When's the groundbreaking?
Board Member Sarr, after pending approval of this evening, we hope to have a groundbreaking in December, and we would then have a one-year build-out to complete the building.
Good, thanks.
I find this a very exciting item to build an art center and on the west side, the far west side. So we were looking forward to the art center, bringing the arts to the Avondale, Goodyear community, Litchfield. So it's very exciting, and thanks for all the effort that people put into that, Claire.
Thank you for your support.
Any other comment? All right, all of those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Third is the approval of the conceptual approval for remodeling in the Technology 3 Automotive Building at Glendale Community College. Ms. Thompson?
Mr. President, members of the board, this is part of our 2004 bond program, and it will remodel a facility originally constructed in 1968 and replace some aged infrastructure, including HVAC, fire suppression, IT, and we recommend its approval.
Okay. Motion to approve.
I move we pass this motion.
All right, Mr. Lum moves.
Second.
Mr. Sarr seconds a motion for the conceptual approval for remodeling in the Technology 3 Automotive Building at Glendale Community College. Discussion?
We had some discussion on the importance and the value of automotive in Glendale, and I was convinced that the career is still promising, and this is what we need, and I think this kind of work skills center in Glendale needs to be revised, and I'm glad we're taking the lead in this.
My question, I guess, is it's mostly for building remodel, if I read this correctly. Is there any money set aside for new equipment?
Mr. President, Mr. Sarr, yes, there is equipment money in the bond fund. Actually, we will deplete the equipment bond money in this project so that they will have not only state-of-the-art technology, IT, but state-of-the-art other equipment that a program like this requires.
And is this program, I know on another part of your campus, you're working with one of the automotive companies.
We also partner with Ford and GM in this facility.
And do they provide equipment at all, or they?
Yes, they provide equipment for their particular manufacturing so that our students then really come equipped to deal with all the U.S. manufacturers of automobiles.
Good, thank you.
Other discussion? And all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The fourth item is the approval of a job order contracting purchase order remodeling at the existing Performing Arts Center at the Glendale Community College. Ms. Thompson?
Mr. President, members of the board, when the district initiated its project to bring on performing arts centers at the colleges that lack those, it also recognized that many of our existing performing arts centers were aging and would need renovation. So this is one of the several requests you have to approve renovation work at an existing performing arts center.
Your motion to
I
approve?
move we approve this item.
All right, Mr. Lum moves.
Second.
Mr. Miranda seconds a motion to approve the contracting purchase order remodeling at the existing Performing Arts Center building at Glendale Community College. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'm very proud of the Arts Center at Glendale. I mean, students come from all over the county to go there. They're even asking me, why are we building one in Estrella Mountain, because of their Performing Arts Center is so strong. But I think the West Side needs one, and this center is old and remodeling, and just the talent and the skills over there are just unbelievable, and I'm proud of the work that's happening in Glendale, and I'm glad we can give them an improved art center.
Okay. Others? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. The next item is Human Resources, the approval of revision to Staff Policy Manual and repeal of Chancellor's Executive Council Policy Manual. Mr. Bowers?
President Burke, members of the governing board, with this item, this is a proposal, it's actually a second reading, an action item, to revise the existing staff policy manual and repeal the Chancellor's Executive Council, or CEC, policy manual. It's recommended that the board approve the revisions to sections A1, A20, A29, B5, and B7, and the addition of a new appendix, Appendix G, Maricopa and EMCC Southwest Skills Center's policy manuals as revised, and append them to the staff policy manual. The revisions are shown in legislative format on the attached documents, and it is further recommended that the governing board approve repealing the CEC policy manual. The reason for, or the intent, or the result of these changes is that we will be incorporating all of the employment positions and all of the position incumbents of the Maricopa and Australia Mountain community college Southwest skill centers into coverage under the staff policy manual, effective at the earliest November 1st, 2013. And for the first time, the folks who work at the skill centers will be full-fledged, full-time regular employees of the district, and will have all the rights pertinent thereto as that, having that status. This also incorporates CEC members as non-classified employees under certain provisions of the staff policy manual, again effective November 1st, and repeals the existing CEC policy manual, also effective November 1st, 2013.
Motion to approve.
Yes.
Mr. Sarr moves.
Second.
Mr. Lum seconds a motion for the approval of a revision to staff policy manual and repeal of Chancellor's Executive Council CEC policy manual. Is there discussion?
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Well, I understand and find there to be some really good pieces to this, especially the repeal of the Chancellor's Executive Council policy manual, the inclusion of these other areas within the district to recognize them as full-fledged members of Maricopa Community College system. It is still being attached to a document that has not been thoroughly and completely in its total put through a proper, respectful IBM process. Even the IBM process for the small, minute pieces that were put through the IBM process were not properly IBM conducted, and were instead done so in an inappropriate manner. And so it needs to be that this whole thing be revisited and redone in a more appropriate and inclusive and thorough, complete and total approval by staff. And so with that, I will be voting no, but not because I disagree with the good parts. It's just that the baseline, when you start with a faulty baseline, then it puts all the rest of it in a very inappropriate place.
Other comments?
Mr. President,
Mr. Miranda?
I'm wondering, you have essentially two items to approve here, is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm wondering what the rationale was for including both of them under the same approval, well, basis. I mean, I would think that you would want to separate these two items, and I just didn't know why they were listed this way on the agenda. If somebody could give me an explanation why.
Mr. Bowers, do you have?
Yes, the reason for that is that actually all of the items are attached or become part of the new staff policy.
Yes. It just occurs to me, in doing away with the CEC manual, they have moved CEC members into the policy manual.
Yes.
And so it's one action. While moving them into this area, they've done away with another part of the policy.
So, Mr. Bowers, Mr. President, Mr. Bowers, are you saying then that we can't do one without the other?
No, we can't.
No.
It would take
They're
two
separate.
actions. If we did away with the CEC policy manual, we'd have to have another action to put them into the policy manual. Then we'd have to have another action to put the Skills Center employees into the policy manual. There'd be three actions if we did it separately.
Okay, thank you.
I have a comment. I would like to thank everybody that worked on this. I know a lot of work, Mr. Bowers and yourself, and the team of people that worked to make this a better manual and make it one manual. So I want to thank your efforts.
And that is the employee group leadership and representatives who serve on the All CPD committee and are committed to the IBM process. These folks work 4 hours every other week, every other Thursday, committing their time and their efforts to improving relationships, improving trust, and creating a document that we feel is a step forward. Thank you.
Any other comment? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Motion carries 4-1. The next item is the approval of the Chancellor's contract. Dr. Glassberg, you would like to remove this, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Is that the board agreeable to?
No.
No.
I want to let the chancellor know that he supported his efforts. I concerned that we haven't given him, the board's goals and visions and policy for him to feel comfortable in signing a contract. I think it's important to pass this item supporting the chancellor and letting him know that we are one team, we're moving forward as a one team, and we're agreeing on making Maricopa College a better college. We work and discuss on details where we have differences, but all in all, we come out and want to speak with one voice.
I want to second everything that Mr. Lum has just said, and I would like to make the motion that we approve the Chancellor's contract of employment.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second to approve the Chancellor's contract. Dr. Glasper, I hope you will take this as support.
Discussion?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have to sign it.
And I was not planning to.
And I wouldn't either if that's how he feels. It's, to my feeling, it's his choice. He's under contract now. He still has a couple of years, including this year, on his contract, so it's not like he's not under contract with us. So I defer to his suggestion,
The items will be
his
approved
request.
and he can sign it when he wants.
That being said, Mr. Chair, and that's.
Well, no. I don't think the board should be that cavalier toward the chancellor. I think we ought to listen to him.
No, I'm not saying we're being cavalier, that we shouldn't listen to him.
No,
My
when,
comment,
when we say he can sign it or not, I think that's cavalier.
and that's your opinion, but the bottom line is, I feel that we, as Mr. Lum has said, we are showing that we are behind him and his efforts to create a one Maricopa and to to take the steps and the measures that he is taking to try to create a one Maricopa and to address some of these situations that he is taking on.
Okay. Dr. Glasper, what you stated your interest as wanting a feedback from the board on the limitations. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. The limitations are part of policy.
Mm-hmm.
And subject to the board's approval of the limitations and the insertion of statutory language or any other language that the board may deem appropriate, I think it's incumbent upon me to reserve the right to find out what that language is, because I may not like or appreciate language that may in any way infer that the operations of this district are other than the board having one employee. And until I see that language, I'd like to make sure that that's the case.
Okay.
Don't we have the language in policy? I think it's pretty clear in policy.
Yes, it is.
That the only person we hire and fire as a board is the chancellor.
Correct.
We approve by state statute all hiring, firing by the college, but our authority is only to hire and fire the chancellor, and we state that in policy.
However, Mr. Chair, Mr. Lum, however, the interpretations and the measurements may be such that would allow for interpretation that the measurements occur at the college level and not be measured at the chancellor's level, and may go to the individual presidents and/or vice presidents. And I think that may be contrary. And until I see that language, I just think it's a good practice to wait, verify.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know how that could have came from any comments or positions that anyone on the board has made, because the comments that I made were that we needed to be able to hold the chancellor, and only the chancellor, I have never heard anyone suggest anything else, but that we can't have the interpretations or the measurements of the interpretations or our questions to the interpretations to a policy that isn't a policy. And so never has there ever been anyone on this board ever mentioned that it be any different than it just be a direct communication with the chancellor as far as limitations or interpretations and then board approval of that, of the same. So that is a concern that I don't feel any board member feels to be a valid one that we have expressed.
I disagree.
Okay. I have a, yes, Mr.
I just
Giordano?
had, it seems to me that, again, to focus on a specific words, as Chancellor said, interpretations and measurements, and whether those measurements, interpretations would lie heavily at the district level or heavily at the local college level. And I'd just like an explanation, Mr. Chancellor, how that's problematic for an efficient district and running the district from your end as a chancellor.
How it's problematic is if the interpretations include any kind of directives to individuals out of the colleges, either by measurement of interpretation or by action. And I think the language itself would allow me to interpret and the board to accept appropriate language that would hold me solely responsible. And I would like to have the opportunity to present that language to the board.
I think as a courtesy to the,
Mr. President, I'm not through yet. I just wanted to ask one question on this because it seems to have surfaced, at least your mention today, and I know that it's something that needs to be aired out, and that is employees going directly to board members. That seems to be problematic, or at least that's been indicated many times here. I can see both sides of this coin. I can see occasions when board members have no other remedy except, members, employees, as well as members of the public, can go directly to a board member simply because there is no other remedy available. And I guess what you're trying to say is you assure me that, or assure us, the board, that within these interpretations, as they work themselves out, it'll answer that question. There won't be a problem with that. I understand what micromanaging is, and I understand that word surfaces, but I still feel that there has to be some latitude given to employees to approach a board member. And I just wanted to ask you, do you see any under what you would later on come up with your interpretations and your measurements that you propose to the board, do you see any situations that could arise where an employee can go directly to a board member on an issue?
Well, I'm not saying employees can't go to the board members if they are in their district or if they want to present an issue. What I am asking, that before a resolution is made or a determination is made, that they be directed back to me to seek a resolution as the CEO of this district. And that's the only thing I'm asking at this particular point in time.
Mr. President, I rescind my second to the
okay.
motion.
Okay, the second has been rescinded, and as a courtesy to Dr. Glasper, I think it would be well for us to postpone this item until the November meeting. And I'll make the motion that we postpone item C2 until the November meeting.
Second.
Motion is seconded. Is there discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Item D is the information technology, approval of the student information system financial aid regulation support. Mr. Kelty?
Mr. Kelty, you've earned the right to sit in the chair.
I don't think my name's there yet, so I'll wait for official approval.
I believe that that's a right that the chancellor gives and not a board member.
I'll have a vote on that one, by the way.
Okay, President Burke, members of the board, this proposal is to seek approval to get Oracle to come in and help us do an upgrade to our SIS system to update the financial aid information for next calendar year. As you probably all know, there are changes in guidelines and rules for financial aid, and we need help updating SIS to facilitate that.
Okay. You have a question for Mr. Kelty?
Motion.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Mr. Sarr moves. Ms. Pearson seconds a motion to approve the Student Financial Information System Financial Aid Regulation Support. Any discussion?
Oracle, Mr. President, Oracle is our best partner in this whole thing, obviously, and PeopleSoft.
Correct.
Also part of Oracle.
They're the ones who write it and maintain it.
Yeah. Where does this bring us to in that relationship and to the end result?
Do you mean the end result in deploying CS9 down the road? The CS9 project is still moving forward, but in a slightly adjusted time frame. This is going to keep us running with version 8.9 of PeopleSoft. until version 9 is deployed. The contract covers from early next year. It'll be in place and running. The software update will be done early next year in the spring, and will cover any updates to the software necessary in 8.9 through October.
When they stop, they're not going to support it at some point, too.
There will come a time when Oracle does not support 8.9, but we're not there yet.
Okay, that was my next question.
Any other question or discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Monitoring reports, budget analysis, Fund 1, Ms. Thompson.
Mr. President, members of the board, this first budget analysis report for Fund 1, or the general fund, is the final for fiscal 12-13. In July, we brought you a preliminary. Since then, we have closed the fiscal year and have our final accounting of expenditures and revenues. Very similar results to the preliminary that we presented. Our spending pattern was typical and on par with prior years. Same with revenues. We did meet the financial stability requirements set by the board and had a slight increase in fund balance.
Thank you. 2004 General Obligation Bonds, Series A, B, C, Series, don't get B? It's on here.
Mr. President, members of the board, I have another item
Oh,
for
I
the
see.
first 3
Yeah,
months.
missed B, yes. Budget Analysis Report, Fund 1, yes. General Unrestricted Fund.
Mr. President, members of the board, this is the budget analysis report for the general fund for the first quarter of the fiscal year. And again, as in prior years, our spending pattern is very typical of prior years. That's because most of our expenditures in personnel, and there's a biweekly payroll. There also are revenues that are typical in terms of collections to prior years because of the cycle of revenue collections, and we expect to meet our financial stability requirement.
The next item is the General Obligation Bonds, 2004.
Mr. President, members of the board, this also is a final report for last fiscal year on our bond activity. In fiscal 12-13, we did issue the remaining authorization of about $150 million. So we have issued all of our 2004 authorization. And as of the end of June, we had a balance of about $194 million, though that is not free for new projects. It's all been designated for projects that have been in the planning for some time.
Okay. And then item D, 2004 General Obligation Bonds.
Mr. President, members of the board, this is the general obligation quarterly report for the first quarter of fiscal 13-14, and in the period between June and September, our balance available dropped to about $182 million, so we are spending down our authorization and our proceeds.
Okay. Thank you. The next item is community linkage, governing board reports, and the first topic is a debriefing of the ACCT 2013 Leadership Congress. Each of the board members does a report on the conference, and we share some information. So, who would like to start?
Mr. Chair, I have submitted to our assistant those classes that I went to, along with all the handout materials, and actually a couple classes that I wasn't able to attend. But I enjoy the fact that the ACCT publishes all of the handout materials for all of the sessions, which enabled us to check into those that we were not able to attend, and they were worth it. So it'll be part of the record.
Okay. Ms. Pearson?
I enjoyed the educational opportunity and the experience of the courses from some of the college's reports and information they shared on sustainability and many other topics and subjects along that line. One of the ones that I found especially interesting was the symposium, and the amount of work and effort and commitment of time and energy and resources and personnel that the Gates Foundation gave to the entire conference, and especially the symposium. The educational director that was there, Daniel Greenbright, he was making comments about the need for recognizing that we are losing our focus and our mission as community colleges and trying to strive to become university systems in the structure and approach that we're taking and pricing ourselves right out of our special category, and challenged the differences that people were, or community colleges were actually making in those areas when they keep their costs down rather than become where it's just as cheap or advantageous to go straight to a university instead of community college, when in fact some students that are doing that because of the scholarships and the foundation's monies that are attracting them to the universities and making it actually even cheaper to go straight to universities don't necessarily always do better at the university, but that we're losing our mission, we're losing our focus, we're losing our sight, and we're also losing because of our commitment to wanting to be mini universities or grow up to be universities, our difference, our ability to change and our ability to move to the needs of the community because of our loss of focus and loss of vision of what community colleges are supposed to represent. The other thing that he expressed was a frustration that they were going to start looking into as to why community colleges are abandoning their child care facilities. And when I asked him further on this and said, but when evaluations are done to find that the community colleges can't afford or that they cost too much money, he said that he doesn't believe that these assessments are properly being evaluated as to the cost to the community and the loss of these single moms that then no longer can continue their education. And that this is something that they're going to be really hitting hard on this type of evaluation approach to eliminating daycares, which I found personally very interesting and exciting and appreciated. The other thing that I really enjoyed, the opportunity of being a part of the Senate, where we were able to elect Dana to the board at large. This is a pretty big deal because looking at the size of Maricopa, the amount of support Maricopa gives to ACC, and the importance that ACCT plays in helping us to make sure that community colleges aren't defined by any other measure but by those that are appropriate for community colleges, and many other leadership and training things that ACCT does for community colleges. To have Maricopa finally have a representation and a voice and on the board for ACCT is huge. And so I'm still proudly celebrating and wearing my sticker that I worked the votes to make sure that we got Dana on that board. And very, very grateful that he was willing to step up. This is a huge time commitment, a huge sacrifice on his part, and I'm so grateful for the passion that he has for doing that work. It is absolutely amazing and to be recognized. And then also the efforts and the work that were done and the representation that the Asian Pacific Islander and Native American groups were able to have with ACCT in many of the programs, the performances, the receptions and things of that nature really made me proud and happy for the support that I've had as the chair and the Pacific Regional Representative elected for the Asian Pacific Islander and Native American group. And I want to thank everybody for the support that I've received in those responsibilities as well.
Mr. Miranda?
First of all, the immensity of the whole Congress, I think, struck me because I wasn't expecting that many sessions. There was literally hundreds of sessions on a lot of topics. I did focus in on developmental education because I think that's important, and I did feel that it's an issue, it's a challenge that's affecting all the school districts. I mean, all the community college districts. It's just not our own. I think next year I would hope that maybe our community college system can make some presentations at the Congress because I think we have some interesting things that are going on, innovative things that are going on at Mesa Community College, for instance, in developmental ed, the way they mix students that test into English and math, and they mix those that don't test in. I also found the partnerships that people spoke about in all the sessions to be very interesting because there's partnerships spoken about with school districts, high school districts, secondary school districts, partnerships with business and partnerships with community organizations. I mentioned it to the superintendent of Phoenix Union High School District that I thought that this conference should just be for just as much for high school counselors as it could be for anyone else that attended the conference. I think they'd learn a lot. I did find one thing that was very much missing, and I got to get online and kind of do my analysis and my evaluation of the Congress, but I just found it to be very unusual that so little was covered on technology, and yet that's illuminating the horizon. And I don't think we had one session that focused on technology specifically. So I think maybe next year, especially with what the district is doing, with our investment of $50 million and what we got to do, and security and those aspects of it, that I think we'd be primed to present at the next Congress leadership Congress, that is, on technology. I think
Get
it'd be
involved
great.
with League of Innovation, you'll find it. Overwhelmingly.
Yeah, I submitted a board report, will be in the board minutes, and I participated in 2 workshops. And Tina, if you would bring up the slides, I want to just go over a few things that we presented. We did do 2 workshops, and one was we put together leadership, Hispanic Latino leadership group across the nation, and we put a panel together, and the panelists were Rose Benavides with South Texas College, myself, Hector Ortiz with Harrisburg College in Pennsylvania, Robert Urenga, the immediate past president of ACCT from Long Beach College, and Robert Zawate from Alamo College in Texas. And that was the panel. We put together a panel. We put together some national facts with the help of Sue Cater on Hispanic students nationwide. I think they're important to discuss tonight. The U.S. Hispanic population has grown 47.5% between 2000 and 2011. 50% of the nation Hispanics live in 3 states, California, Texas, and Florida. Approximately 90% of Hispanics enrolled in K-12 education today are native-born. Over 60% of Latinos adults have completed high school. College enrollment among Hispanic high school graduates has risen in the past decades, according to the census. 49% of Hispanic high school graduates were enrolled in college in 2012, more than whites, 47%, blacks, 45%, and high school grads, according to the Pew Research Center. The next slide, of course, we talked about the mission of the the National Latino Center, but we also wanted to talk about what student success that I presented on the ACE program, I presented on Hoops of Learning and minority males. We also each want to talk about what it means to be a trustee and being a leader of a college, and what should a trustee do who has a large Latino population in their colleges. And I put these items on here. Make yourself available. I find some trustees, you couldn't even find a website or a phone number or any way to contact them. Be active in the community events. If you have a large Hispanic community, everybody's welcome to be there at cultural, political, and social events. And if you're seeing in the community, you can hear their concerns and be part of the community. So be available. Be knowledgeable on the Immigration Reform Bill and the DREAM Act. I think it's important legislation to Hispanics, documented or undocumented. It has a lot to do with our identity. Rejecting the Hispanic immigrants is rejecting a Latino person, and we take it, sometimes it comes to heart, and it's hard not to take it personally. Be informed on the Affordable Care Act. There's a lot of misinformation. It affects all the low income. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's going to be a lot of people fighting on it. And I think if you're a leader in the community, you need to at least know the facts. So when someone's giving you some misinformation, you know better. And be an effective leader, be the change. And to be an effective leader, you get involved in an organization and say, oh, they don't do anything. Well, it's as good as you are. So if you're putting something into the committee, the community, the board, whatever you are, it's as good as you make it. And if you surface issues and discussion and make it, you're going to be a good leader. Be an advocate for students and student success. I think this is an important role for trustees, and the message is well delivered. You have a have a few pictures that we,
I didn't put them here, I put them in the written report, sorry.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I attended a pre-session on federal legislation overview and got information on about 8 different areas facing community colleges in federal legislation. That will be on our website. In addition, I attended a student success symposium. It's the 3rd year of this symposium, and trustees and administrators meet to talk about ways to achieve student success. And we heard from several panels during that symposium, some of them on changing policies, some on performance funding, some on the use of technology in higher education to help students succeed. We were fortunate to hear Bill Gates speak on Wednesday evening, and he gave an interesting talk. Actually, we knew a great deal of what he said because we're involved in technology a great deal. But he made one point that ought to give faculty some pause, I think. He talked about the possibility of developing a course in a subject area by a highly respected professor, and it would be difficult for faculty in the classroom perhaps to match that. And he gave that sort of as a warning, and he talked about using technology and online courses perhaps to supplement teaching. But faculty ought to, if you'd like to read that, I'll send that article to you. I wanted to point out that Mr. Lum was also elected to the Personnel Committee for the Pacific Region during our Senate session. And we had a meeting of Arizona State trustees on Thursday evening. It's the first time that trustees have gotten together as a body for several years. So we met and had a speaker about advocacy and got to know some of the trustees from the other districts. I also attended a session on strength in numbers, the benefits of a multi-district collaboration. This occurs in San Diego, where 6 community college districts in the San Diego area have a consortium, and it's comparable to the Arizona Community College Coordinating Council that was formed this year. Although they're in a much smaller geographic area, they meet monthly along with their board chairs. So a lot of activity in that coordinating council that is similar to what we have in Arizona now. Again, you will find our written reports on the website and encourage you to read those. There's much more information than we can do in a short period right now. Mr. Lum, Mr. Sarr.
And just to add, another conference I went to last week was the conference on entrepreneurship, and I really enjoyed that conference. I've been to hundreds of conferences in my time on school boards. But this was one of the better ones. Not to take anything away from the rest of the conference, I have to congratulate South Mountain for their efforts in picking up a $15,000 grant, and it was a very competitive grant process. And I listened to half a dozen of the other applicants, and I was very proud of the people that represented South Mountain. So thank you, Dr. Olson, for sending them and their work that they did. I did spend time in a tract called leadership, and I learned a new word. I got to put my glasses on to actually say what it is. Effectuation. It's probably not new to many of you. It was to me. And Dr. And I'm going to massacre her name, but Saris Vathi did the conference presentation for this whole 2 days. It was fascinating, and not just about how entrepreneurship works in the commercial world, but how it works within organizations like our district. It's really enlightening, and I know that other members of our district that were there walked away with some great ideas, and I'm sure that's going to bug the presidents here for the next year. But to let you know about next year, we're hosting this conference next year here in Phoenix. So I'm looking forward to the 3 members of this organization, Rio, Corporate College, and South Mountain, putting on an outstanding conference, along with obviously the people who do the work at the National Association. So congratulations for getting this here in Phoenix. It's the first time we've really had a large group of trustees and other members of colleges here in the Valley, so that's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, individual reports, Mr. Lund,
I have no report.
okay, Mr. Miranda,
None.
okay, Ms. Pearson,
No further report.
Mr. Sarr,
Nope.
okay. Internal community, the Chancellor's report. Maricopa
Mr.
priorities.
Chair, members of the board, I would like to ask Deborah Thompson to come forward she's going to give two reports, one on Maricopa priorities and the other on performance-based funding update.
Okay.
Mr. President, members of the board, I have two topics I'd like to cover this evening. One is Maricopa priorities, and the second is performance funding. For Maricopa priorities, back in May 2012, the Chancellor hosted a day-long seminar for CEC members, senior staff and faculty members at the colleges, and also the district office, as well as faculty leadership for the system. And it was to explore a process with some consultants who work with institutions around the prioritization of programs and services. So for us to better understand what that process was, and it's a process that was developed by Dr. Bob Dickinson when he was president at the University of Northern Colorado. I think many of us, if not maybe all of us, found it intriguing and worthwhile to at least explore further. So the Chancellor appointed a Maricopa Priorities Steering Team to look at that process and consider what it might, how it might apply to Maricopa, how Maricopa might use it. And over the past year plus, the steering team has met and has looked at the process and proposed a process for Maricopa to engage in over the next about 18 months. And this, one of the first acts that the group took was to look at what the mission of Maricopa Priorities is, to better understand how to plan it and what its benefits might be for us. So you can see some key words in here about a reflective process, assessing current areas for educational excellence, helping realign resources to meet community needs. The group also looked at a purpose statement, and it's very similar to the mission statement, examining and assessing all current instructional and support programs to explore origins, how they've evolved, and really most importantly to determine how they serve the community's changing needs and evaluate whether they're positioned to meet the future needs of our communities. Last, we looked at a goal statement, and this is also very similar. It talks about alignment of efforts and resources to focus on improvement, building programs that contribute to student success. I think at times we have explored the questions of why now, and others have asked us about that. One is that Dr. Glasper has provided a vision for us to be one Maricopa, to act as a system, to act more holistically, to leverage our resources. And that is evident in a number of the initiatives we have underway, like the Seamless Student Experience or Student Success Initiative. By examining all of our programs and making determinations about whether they have the currency that's needed to meet our community's needs, we really think we could truly leverage one Maricopa and act as one Maricopa. Aside from that, we know that we lost over $60 million in state aid during this Great Recession, which is more than the individual budgets of 8 of our colleges. So we experienced a substantial revenue loss, but we did weather it, and we know that it can happen that you lose a tremendous amount of funds. So we really wanted to make sure we were well positioned as an organization to be as effective as possible. And last, we must come to admit that we can't all do everything, or if we do, we're not all going to do everything well. So it is really incumbent on us to figure out how to do everything we do as well as possible in terms of meeting community needs. In high-level summary, this is the process. It begins with self-assessments that are done by all program and service areas. These are reviewed by local task forces. At the colleges, there are two, an instructional and a support services task force. At the district office, just one, since we don't offer instruction. Those recommendations are made to local steering teams who make recommendations to the local champion, and the local steering team ultimately forwards the final recommendations to the Maricopa Priorities Steering Team. These are recommendations that are coming forward from the task forces and support teams. We would like for there to be a lot of communication going back and forth between task force members, steering team members, the champion, so there aren't any surprises, and input can be provided at each step of the way. It is possible that the champion will not agree with the recommendations coming forward, and we would ask that the champion append their concerns or their recommendations to the report as it moves forward to the system level. The self-assessments are completed on uniform templates, one for instruction, one for support. There's a rubric that we have provided for scoring, though the recommendations that will be made are not based on scores per se. They're really just a guidepost for determining what a recommendation might look like. To give you an example, a program might score very high, and that might make it appear that it should be expanded, but in fact, the self-assessment might indicate that the program was exactly right size, so no need for additional resources. Another program could score high, but it could be evident that there's demand and need for expansion. So there are different options. The scoring is just meant to start a conversation. We've provided in the resource guide, we developed examples of information that should be provided in answering the questions. The templates are both qualitative and quantitative. Some district data will be provided, some may need to come from the colleges themselves. We're encouraging the program and service area leaders to engage the entire group in the process so that everyone has a role to play and a voice in what is submitted. And we're looking for supervisors or managers to sign off on the self-assessment, so there is some quality assurance that occurs after the assessment is drafted. And these are due to the local task forces by May 2nd of next year. These are the options that we're recommending can be put in place. We differed from Dr. Dickinson in this regard because he would have each program or service be placed in a quartile or quintile with specific outcomes or recommendations related to that quartile or quintile. We thought that that was too narrow and too arbitrary, and we thought there was possibility that a program or service area could both expand and reduce. Elements of it could expand, but elements could be reduced. And we didn't want to arbitrarily assign each program to just a fifth or a fourth of dollars or programs. We thought this was more nuanced and allowed us more possibilities for improvement of our system. This is really just talking about most of what I had already talked about with the champion's involvement and the conversation that needs to be occurring during this review process of the self-assessments, and then what might be submitted to the Maricopa Priority Steering Team. We are looking for the recommendations to be presented to the local communities by no later than September 5th, with another 2 weeks for some input or questions or better understanding gained at the local level, and then the final recommendations coming to the Maricopa Priority Steering Team on September 19th. The Maricopa Steering Team is really not looking to do anything but try to draw together some recommendations that seem to apply across the system, or to try to look at some potential regional or systemic approaches. It's not meant to second guess the specific recommendations, except to see how they apply holistically, potentially across the system. Implementation, some of this might occur when the local task forces and steering team recommendations are made. Others that involve policy action might take longer, a couple of years or longer potentially. And we'd like to learn from mistakes that we may make in this process, but we think it's a good process and we need to consider applying it every 3 to 5 years so that we continue to take a look at our system and make recommendations as to how we should best realign and manage our operations to serve our community best. We are starting on training. We've started on in-person training, and we're in the process of finalizing a training for everyone that's in Canvas so that they can go online. The district steering team will serve as a process resource, and we will communicate any changes or suggestions we have for best practices going forward. That concludes my presentation on Maricopa priorities.
I'm almost embarrassed to ask you, did you give a timeline for this?
The timeline basically is that we're starting right now for doing training, and we're starting to have everyone start to organize their task forces. We're looking to have the self-assessments begin in the next few weeks, and they need to be completed sometime, probably in draft form in about maybe the March or so timeframe, because they need to be reviewed by supervisors and managers at the local level. Then the final drafts come forward to the task forces May 2nd of next year. Between May 2nd and September 5th, the task forces and steering teams do their work to finalize their recommendations that are forwarded at the system level.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
When there's been some concerns and some expression of wondering why, and expressions shared as to the downside or a possible negative to performance-based funding. And as I've listened to these concerns, and as I've listened to and tried to assess and evaluate the premise of performance-based funding, and some of the issues seem to have merit, and I'm not saying I don't disagree with some of the concerns for performance-based funding. Then going to ACCT and sitting through a symposium that talked about performance-based funding and who's doing it and why and what the future holds in this, then it really struck that Dr. Glasper, Ms. Thompson, are placing Maricopa out in the front, because there is no turning this back. It's coming. And more even like grants and things of the future, the wave is, and the merits have been shown to be stronger than some of the concerns. And because then, when I felt that there hadn't been an ACCT at the symposium, some real, they identified or they recognized and acknowledged the concerns and some of the downsides. They really didn't give, okay, so what do we do to prevent those downsides from occurring? And so then afterwards, speaking with some of the people from the Gates Foundation, they helped me to understand more. And I feel very assured that the concerns that have been expressed, and those of you who do have those concerns, to know that there are some very committed people, which I believe we have here, Ms. Thompson, Dr. Glasper, in addressing those, any possible downsides before they could ever occur. And so I want to thank you for being recognized as a leader in the approach that Maricopa is taking in making this step. Thank you.
Mr. President, Ms. Thompson, I think we had a short discussion on this. There seems to be some fear and nervousness about the priorities. If I don't write the description of my department well, or my department's going to get defunded, what kind of feedback loop is there to here's what I describe my department and here's how other colleges describe the department? I mean, and people are getting nervous that if it's not went very well, they might get defunded. And what other considerations and are you looking at other than what they submitted description? Are we looking at need careers in that field anymore? Are we looking at transferability? Are we looking at trends? And how can you talk to that for me, please?
Mr. President, Mr. Lum, I would agree with you that there are a number of people who are concerned, and that's why we've made an effort to go out several times to present on this. I presented in the winter, and part of my budget presentation was to talk about Maricopa priorities to start to get people familiar. I did the same in September and October of this year in the budget presentation I was working on. In the training we're doing, which is about 90 minutes, and there are at least 2 at every college in the district office. We've tried to provide more detail about this, and we've tried to emphasize that early on the steering team invited Dr. Glasper to one of the meetings and asked him, are we looking at targets? Are we looking at dollars to be saved? Do you have any kind of goals in mind? And he was very clear with us that this was not about meeting a certain target in terms of numbers of programs to eliminate or reduce or dollars to eliminate or reduce. It's about making Maricopa better, and that's what the initiative is about. So we have tried to provide some comfort to people who have concerns, and we've also tried to say there's a list of 8 recommendations, and you could have multiple recommendations in your program or your service area. And while the tendency is to focus on reductions or eliminations, that may not be the case in most cases, and it likely will not be. So to try to get them to point to the positive recommendations that could be made that could help improve the program and help better serve the community. Not to say that there won't be some programs or services that are eliminated or reduced, but that isn't the point of doing this.
Yeah, I find the whole process fascinating and hope we really discover stuff about ourselves and how we can do better. And but then I'm not an employee worried about my job. So I can see how they feel angst about it. And I do like your other alternatives. I thought that was very good. You know, not only fund or defund, it's to expand, reduce, grow. I mean, you really made some good alternatives. But thanks for all the work you're doing in it.
Yes.
I had a chance to sit in on one of their meetings, and that was fascinating to listen to the discussion. It's wide open, lots of good ideas and other things thrown out there to think about. I'm glad it's a longer process. I guess my question is, when you talk about programs and services that you're looking at, how deep do you go? And are you looking at the class level, the course number level? Are you looking at athletics down to the football team level? How deep are you going with it?
Mr. President, Mr. Saar, that is definitely something we grappled with at the steering team level for quite a long time, quite a lot of discussion, and is still occurring at the colleges as well. So we wouldn't go to the course level. That's not what this is about, just to look at each individual course. That would be impossible to do. But we're not necessarily saying that what is currently known as a department or a division equals a program or service area. So just a couple of examples on the support side, on facilities, buildings and grounds in my mind is probably a support area. We wouldn't be looking at the support area being the time spent changing filters or the time spent mowing the lawn. Those are just functions within the support area of buildings and grounds. Or foreign languages, for example. We wouldn't want to do the instructional area at foreign languages because we would never know if there are some foreign languages that really should be taught that aren't being taught. We wouldn't be thinking about that. Or maybe are so low demand that shouldn't be taught anymore. So you need some level of detail kind of in between how we're currently organized and a really, really small level of detail.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks. And then you want to go into performance
Yes.
funding?
Yeah. So my second presentation is on performance funding, and I'll give you a little bit of history first. Several years ago, the state was awarded a grant from the Lumina Foundation, and it was entitled Getting Ahead. And there were a number of different elements of getting ahead. One of them was looking at finance reform, especially from the state for the universities and the community colleges. A lot of work was done. The only action that was taken was that the governor asked the universities, or required the universities, to put together a performance funding model, which was funded a couple of years ago and is in place even still. They also said at the time that they would be looking to do the same for K-12 and then for community colleges. At about the same time, what then was the Arizona Community College President's Council and now is the Arizona Community Colleges Coordinating Council really thought that to direct work on performance funding for community colleges, it needed to develop a strategic vision for 2020, similar to what ABOR did with the 3 public universities. And that was developed. There are goals that were set, and there were metrics that were defined for each of the goal areas. And you've probably seen copies of this. The website is something I've listed on this slide. More recently, in early 2012, Lumina approached Dr. Glasper and asked if he was interested in applying for a grant for Maricopa to look at performance funding, more or less building on the getting ahead work, but going further and developing a model. We were awarded that grant. It started November 1 and ends October 31st of this month. And to advance that work, we formed 2 groups. One was a state working group, and that mostly was the business officers, the chief business officers of all the districts, as well as institutional researchers from the districts. We worked on the development of a number of models and visited with ACCPC, now AC4, a number of times to try to set direction. And then later on into the process, as we were making progress with the state model, we formed an internal working group for Maricopa. This is the goal statement that we put in place for the state, and it's fairly wordy, but it's basically to improve student outcomes and success by incenting improvements in institutional performance. We developed early on some guiding principles in order to align our model with what we believed was important for the model to include. Quality is clearly important. We wanted to improve the quality of the educational experience. It needed to be as simple as possible so it was easy to understand and to implement. It needed to be transparent so stakeholders would know what the model is and how it would be used. It was important to us to have it be as objective as possible so that there were not subjective applications of the formula, that people could really predict what kind of funding they would receive or not receive based on the objective standards in the model. We wanted it to be reliable so that data could be verified and replicated, flexible to allow for differences in districts and the colleges as well, and we wanted it to be balanced. So to the extent that there are guiding principles that compete against one another, we needed to make an informed choice about the benefits and the costs that we were involving in the choices we were making. We do have a model that we came up with for the state, and we are proposing it be a 3-year pilot. We don't have an amount of money that we're requesting at this point or a particular start date. We would be looking in the pilot period to evaluate the model annually for technical issues, basically errors that need correction, and do a major evaluation after year 3. And also important to our model is that we use the core metrics that were identified by ACCPC, now AC4. Core metrics are 6 of the metrics that were of the 32 that were viewed to be the most important in terms of community colleges' performance. These are the core metrics. 2 have sub-metrics, as you can see, and those are really around developmental education versus college-level courses. And these are included in the model that we have developed. This is the model in as simple a form as possible without seeing the numbers. What was important to us was to look at both attainment, where we are in terms of our performance in the metrics, and also improvement from year to year. So points can be earned for each of the metrics for both attainment and improvement. And there's a maximum of 20 points that can be earned for both attainment and improvement in each metric. For the 2 metrics with submetrics, it's 10 for each submetric, so the total is 20. We did not weight any of the metrics because they had been identified as core metrics by ACCPC, and we had not gotten any direction that any was more important than the others. Because we wanted to be as objective as possible in terms of the award of points, we were looking for an objective methodology to align points awarded with actual performance. Sherry Lewis and Kerry Mitchell from our institutional research office here looked at the data and found that the metrics for the districts fell into tercile bands, so they would basically band together in different ways. So each district places each metric in a band, and depending on the placement, points are earned or awarded for performance both in attainment and improvement. The points were total for each district, And what we noticed was that the very, very different sizes of the districts really was an issue for us if we just were awarding on points earned. So in Arizona, Maricopa is the largest district, as you know, with over 80,000 footsie. Even the next largest district is 20,000 footsie, so very different in terms of scale and size. And then the smallest districts are around 2,000 footsie. So potentially we could have had a situation where Maricopa would have earned as many points as Pima or as Navajo or Coconino, those are the two smallest, and we would have gotten the same dollars and the same amount of money, which would not have been very fair to our students in Maricopa County, wouldn't go very far, but would go very far for the larger districts. So all of the districts agreed that we should adjust the performance points by share of footsie so that we could allow for the differences in size, and then that percent is applied to new state funding. The one caveat on percentage share of footsie was that we did agree that the share of footsie would be based either on your actual footsie or 5,000 footsie, whichever was larger, because 6 of our districts actually are below 5,000 in footsie, and we wanted to try to help them a little bit with gaining some more resources. We shared the state model and concept with the governor's office on September 27th, and we have another appointment next week to share the model in detail, actually how it works. So they are aware, and they were very appreciative that the community college districts worked together to come up with a model, because they are intending to make a recommendation on one, and they would rather work from where we are coming from than to have to create something that we might not appreciate. We also have CEC approval to move forward with a Maricopa model when the state model is in place. The only difference between the state model and the Maricopa model is, in addition to footsie being a weighting factor, we also have a weighting factor for percentage of credits that are taught in developmental ed out of the total at the college, because we wanted to include a factor about at-risk students. And then we also have a factor for our younger, still developing colleges, which tend to have fewer resources, so that there is a little bit extra that's provided for them. And that's the summary of our performance funding work to date.
Questions? Ms. Thompson?
Yeah, Mr. President, Ms. Thompson, we're talking about state funds, right? I mean, we're not going to talk about performance based on the taxpayer dollars or the tuition dollars that we get.
Mr. President, Mr. Lum, at this point in time, our proposal is entirely around new state funding that would come to the district from the states, and we would allocate to our district.
It would be like
colleges.
incentive monies to improve.
Yes.
Just a follow-up on Mr. Lum's question, does the state know that?
Mr. President, Mr. Miranda, yes, they do know that.
Okay. And they're in agreement that it's going to apply just to their funding that comes to the...
Mr. President, Mr. Miranda, we've only had one conceptual conversation with them. I'm not sure where this discussion is going exactly.
What kind of let sleeping giants think?
Mr. Sarr?
You talked about both the state and the Maricopa models. Within the Maricopa model, I like the idea, but are you going to assign, like you are the state, are we going to get X number of dollars that we're going to throw into a fund that will be distributed based on the Maricopa model? Or is this going to be all funds? Or do you have something in mind along that?
Yeah, Mr. President, Mr. Sarr, at the moment our proposal is that we're asking for new state funding, and that will be used. That's the sole funding source at the moment for performance funding.
Any other comment?
Yeah, the other states are moving towards this model, and it's hard to, if we're looking at funding ourselves totally on performance based. I mean, you have to have like we know we know what our history is, so we can pretty much project. But at the community college, we get students who are kind of experimenting. Am I good enough? Do I want? Am I ready to? And we know maybe a lot of attention deficit disorder students really don't start to develop their higher level thinking until age 25, and they might come back later, but they'll come and experiment with us and then find out they're really not focused enough to for college level work and then come in and out. I mean, so we don't have people that aren't sure they're that serious about college, and we take everybody. So when we talk about performance-based, I mean, the teachers could be doing the best they could, and we're still dealing with a population that may not be ready for college. How does that filter into what we're trying to do and our goals as far as what we think success is?
Mr. President, Mr. Lum, a few points on that. One is that we are proposing to still receive funds from the state based on enrollment, so that recognizes our open access mission. Another point is that part of our focus on rewarding for attainment and improvement is that we know we have different students with different being in different places in their life. So some districts or colleges might be doing really well in something and we should recognize them for their attainment level. Others may have not be doing very well, but they may have a lot of opportunity to improve. So one district might be doing really well and receive points and funding because of their attainment level. Another might be receiving points for progress because they have a lot more that they could do to improve to get to a higher level. So we're trying in that way to recognize different types of students with different needs and different opportunities that exist for getting to a higher level of attainment. And the last piece is that's really why at Maricopa we put in the weighted factor for developmental ed, because we recognize a lot of our students are at that place.
And that is the challenge on performance-based funding at all levels of education, is that if you reward those that excel and do well, and you don't. I mean, and you basically penalize the ones that you don't because the funding has to go somewhere. Then actually you may be just doing the reverse. I mean, you may be adversely affecting students that have some potential but happen to, be part of that category. They isn't doing well, like Mr. Lum said, because they enter the system in need of developmental education. I guess my question also is that, I don't know if I'm drawing this, but I kind of vaguely remember that there's been some modifications with what the governor proposed in terms of performance-based funding, at least as it applies to secondary school levels and primary school levels. And they modified, I guess, the model that they're using. Well, that's my understanding anyway. I think it behooves the committee to look at that, to see if that will affect the way you approach future discussions.
Mr. President, Mr. Miranda, yeah, that is a good point. I don't know what the details are, but even at the governor's office, they've mentioned that there are problems both with the university model and with the K-12 model, and they've had to go back and look at each of them again. And that's part of the reason we propose it as a pilot with the ability to make technical adjustments each year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Awesome job, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the Faculty Executive Council report. Dr. Patricia Finkenstadt.
Thank you, President Burke, members of the board, Dr. Glasper, members of the CEC, and guests. I'd like to take this moment to update you on the Maricopa College's Faculty Foundation. The Maricopa College's Faculty Foundation provides emergency grants and academic scholarships to currently enrolled students throughout the Maricopa colleges. So far in 2013, the Faculty Foundation has collected approximately $37,000 to help provide for students in urgent need. Each semester, these donations are used to prevent students from withdrawing from school due to unforeseen financial emergencies. These have included transportation costs, for example, bus fare, gas, or car repairs, school supplies, and other assorted expenses, including rent, food, and utilities. Often these grants are awarded within 48 hours of the need being identified. On numerous occasions, these emergency scholarships have made the difference for the student being able to continue pursuing their educational goals within the district. The Faculty Foundation relies upon contributions from faculty and other Maricopa employees to help these students stay in school. In addition, we are pursuing opportunities to partner with other nonprofit organizations, such as the firefighter charities, in support of our mission to help students succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Employee groups, Mr. Ted Georges, Crafts.
President Burke, members of the board, Mr. Chancellor, members of your CEC, and all you good folks come here this evening for a very interesting board meeting. Good evening. I'm Ted Georges, and I'm here on behalf of the Unified Crafts Association. And I was going to get up here real quick and just say a few words and get my thing done, because I can see Vice Chancellor Helfgott over there is looking at me, and boss, I got the check. Okay, so, but I think it's very important, since almost everything that was said here tonight, except for about the Chancellor's contract, actually applied to me. First of all, I'm on IBM, been on it 2 years, never seen anything better in the history of Maricopa. Mrs. Pearson, it is a living document, and if we make a mistake, we can certainly correct it. I would also like to talk about the priorities. Through the leadership of Vice Chancellor Thompson, we've done remarkable work, and it's going to be a difficult process, but it's something we should have done sometime in the 50 years on a complete district basis. We've done it locally on a few things, but quite frankly, this is very important. And I'd also like to say, recognize Jim Bowers there, our interim Vice Chancellor of HR. Make him Vice Chancellor. I'm telling you, he's done a superb job through the beginnings of Nikki Jackson, through Mr. Bowers' leadership. I'm thrilled to be involved in an issue-based negotiation, and we are given the opportunity, kept to certain parameters, to chart our own destiny, and it's really going to improve Maricopa. I will keep it more brief, because I get up about 4 a.m. in the morning, and it's almost past my bedtime. So I'm going to just say one thing. I've worked a lot of places in my life, and I've been at Maricopa for quite some time. And I've never had an opportunity to do the things I've given permission to do here. I want to tell you all how lucky I am to work for an organization where an average guy can do a little more. So thank you, Maricopa. Now, on with it. On behalf of the Unified Crafts Association, it is our privilege to dig deep in our pocket to make a donation to the Maricopa Foundation for Student Scholarships. And it's my honor to do it in the name of the Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost here at Maricopa, Dr. Maria Harper Merriman.
Part of my day.
Thank you.
Mr. Georges, may your tribe increase.
Awesome.
The next item is Vice Chancellor reports. Maricopa Foundation, 40 under 40, Dr. Helfgott.
Thank you, Mr. Burke, members of the board. Along with my colleagues, President Gaylor and President Kovala, I'm pleased to share with you this evening one example of an approach to scholarships at the Maricopa Community Colleges Foundation that results in positive outcomes not only for students, but for donors, for the foundation, and for relationships with our community. For a number of years, the foundation has worked with community organizations and local businesses to create matching scholarships. These are just what you might imagine. A donor provides a certain number of scholarships at a certain dollar amount, and the foundation, even with our admittedly limited unrestricted resource dollars, matches each scholarship. The award to the student is doubled, each organization sees its money leveraged, and strong partnerships result. $66,000 in matching scholarships were awarded in 2012, 2013, and so far in 2013-14, we've awarded $44,000 in matching scholarship money. A number of these scholarships, like the one I'm about to describe, are awarded at major community events, highlighting our students, our colleges, and the work of our foundation. And tangentially, these partnerships have resulted in 2 individuals becoming members of our foundation board, one of whom has gone on to serve as board chair. The example we share with you tonight is not the biggest of these partnerships, nor the oldest, but it provides a nice snapshot of how they work and provides an opportunity for you to meet some students who have benefited. For 7 years, Univision Radio has sponsored the annual 40 Hispanic Leaders Under 40 Luncheon. Several years ago, Sherry Milovich, Univision Radio's National Account Manager and now Foundation Board Member, the driving force behind the 40 Under 40 program, came to us and asked how we might collaborate to build an emphasis on education into the 40 Under 40 program. Together, we developed the idea of an emerging leaders recognition at the luncheon, in which 4, and hopefully someday more, Hispanic student leaders at Maricopa Community Colleges would be recognized and awarded matching scholarships, $1,000 each from Univision or one of its sponsors, this year Univision itself, Valle del Sol, Cox Communications, and Wells Fargo, and another $1,000 from the foundation. This year, 2 of those student leaders came from Scottsdale Community College and 2 from Glendale Community College. And with that, I'm happy to now call on Dr. Gaylor to introduce her students and to give them a chance to say a few words if they're still here and awake. She will be followed by Dr. Kovala, who will do the same, and then I will take a moment to close. Dr. Gaylor.
Thank you. President Burke, members of the board, Chancellor Glasper, CEC colleagues and guests, it's my pleasure to introduce actually Aaron Torres, who is a college advisor and also the advisor to our Latino Club, who's going to introduce our 2 students who, I can't see them, I think they're behind the pillar over there. They're going to come to the podium. Yes, Aaron, and introduce our students. Thank you.
President Burke, members of the board, Dr. Glasper, CEC, and guests. My name is Aaron Torres, and I currently work as the Latino Student Club Association advisor. And in that role, I have the privilege of working with 2 of the recipients of the 40 Under 40 Hispanic Leadership Scholarship, Francisco Dominguez and Miriam Villanueva. I'd like to take this time to thank Dr. Helfgott and the Maricopa Foundation and all others involved for making this possible. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to them to say a few words of appreciation. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Burke, members of the board, Dr. Glasper, members of the CEC, and guests. My name is Miriam Villanueva, and I'm a student at SCC pursuing a nursing degree. I hope to one day become a traveling nurse and go and help developing countries after natural disasters. I would like to thank the MCCCD District Foundation, Dr. Helfgott, as well as the Univision Radio for sponsoring my 40 Under 40 scholarship. Scottsdale Community College has definitely given me the tools and experiences to develop as well as enhance my leadership skills. By far, it is the best school in the district for me. Go Chokes! For those of you who do not know, Scottsdale is the proud home of the Artichokes. This scholarship will allow me to further my education at SCC, so for that I am thankful. And in return, I plan to give back to my community through volunteer work, especially the Latino community. Thank you once again, and I hope you continue to have a wonderful evening.
Good evening. President Burke, members of the board, Dr. Glasper, members of the CEC, and guests. My name is Francisco Dominguez, and I am also a student at Scottsdale Community College and a member of the Latino Student Association. I would like to start off by thanking MCCD, Valle del Sol, and Dr. Helfgott for granting me my scholarship. Thank you, which will enable me to keep furthering my education. In addition, I would like to thank Mr. Aaron Torres, who is behind me, who has played an instrumental role in my academic career, going above and beyond to provide me with advice and pushing me to be the best I can be. Ever since I was a little boy, my dream has been to become a lawyer, so I can help defend the rights of all minorities. The scholarship which you have granted me will play a big part in helping me fulfill my dreams. And as an immigrant, they tell you that the U.S. is the land of opportunity. Today I have been granted one by MCCD, Valle del Sol, and I would like to thank you for that, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Mr. President, members of the board, CEC, and guests, I'd like to invite the two Glendale Community College students to the podium, please. It's my privilege, proud privilege, next to Anna Sally, I always say proud privilege, to introduce these two award-winning students at Glendale Community College. The first is Carla Raspardo, who has worked as a part of GCC Mecha and has been involved with the Student Association, including being a student aide and a board member. This year, she stepped up and did work with the new student orientation, facilitating much of the organization behind the scenes, as well as getting our student leaders there to participate. While doing all of this, she's keeping busy with the activities, but she has an exceptional grade point average. With her is Gerardo McNeil, who was raised by a single parent and is the first generation in his family to go to college. He's worked tirelessly to maintain his academic excellence while working part-time as well as volunteering at an elder care facility. He's balanced all of these because he's well-rounded, ambitious, capable, focused, and determined to reach his goals. And now I'd invite each of you to say a few words of thanks to the board.
Alrighty, well, good evening, Dr. Burke, Glassberg, board members, and CEC. I'm gonna try to keep it brief because I know it's been long. So I'd like to thank Wells Fargo, who was one of my sponsors, and MCC for the award. It's definitely a great help for the upcoming semester, I can say, both for, tuition and books. So it's a blessing, especially now that I've found that PVCC, so keeping with the community college, has a program that will be transferring as soon as I'm done with GCC, who has offered a lot to me. My major is in registered dietetics, so the technician program at PVCC will definitely benefit me. So that will along help me with it. And my sister was also benefited with this scholarship, and I can say it was a true blessing for both this semester and the previous one for both her and I. So this is a great movement by 40 to 40, and being there at the dinner, it was inspirational to see 40 people sitting in front of you and saying, one day I want to be in that seat. So the dinner was definitely very motivational, and I'd like to thank you guys for allowing us to be part of it.
And just so you know, she just gave that off the top of her head, so she's going to make me look bad. Well, obviously, President, board members, and everyone else here in attendance, thank you. I speak for both of us when we say that. The scholarship, I don't see it just as a financial aid. I see it as support. I see it as the Maricopa Community Colleges supporting me in my career goals, and that I know when I feel like giving up or something like that, I have this entire community behind me. That's the support that I feel like I get from this scholarship, and I appreciate that a lot. Thank you very much.
Oh,
I want to say to the students, you're the reason the board does this work. You're very inspirational. We appreciate your comments tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Burke, members of the board, in closing, I want to congratulate again these 4 students who are representative of dozens of others who've won matching scholarships. Indeed, the very next day after the Univision event, with Mr. Lum and Mr. Miranda in attendance, we gave 10 more matching scholarships to students in our ACE program at the annual Hispanic Women's Conference luncheon. I want to thank Dr. Gaylor and Dr. Kovala, and I want to thank all of you for your support for the work we do and for the work that you do in support of our colleges, and most importantly for opportunity for our students. And stay tuned. I hope that in the spring sometime we'll be introducing some new matching scholarships, including one involving our friend Dr. Campbell, who was here earlier this evening.
All right. Good. Okay, the next is the Women's Leadership Group mentees, Dr. Maria Harper-Marinick.
Thank you, Mr. Berg, members of the board, Chancellor Glasper, CEC colleagues, and guests. It is my pleasure to welcome the WLG participants for 2013. Let me tell you a little bit about the program. As a reminder, we started the mentor program in the year 2000 to provide opportunities for leadership training and professional development to women in the Maricopa system. Since then, we've had more than 340 women participate in the mentor program, and many of them have moved to positions of more responsibility. The mentor program is supported by a group of women who volunteer their time and their energy to make this a reality. It is co-chaired by Sue Tavakali and Cheryl Crutcher, and I know Cheryl is here. I can't see them. Oh, they're here. And there are others in the planning committee that I would like to acknowledge: Diana Ayala, Johnny Grover, Kathy Hernandez, Suzanne Hibbs, Heather Cruzy, Jennifer Means, Christine Scott, Almitra Walker, and Sandra Chavez. We have 28 participants this year, which is a great number. They were all here earlier. I don't know how many of them are left, but those of you who are here, I would like for you to stand and be recognized. Thank you for participating, and thank you to my colleagues, the vice chancellors and college presidents, for supporting their participation in the program. Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Thank you. College reports, innovation in general education learning outcomes assessment. Dr. Dale?
Thank you, President Burke, members of the board, Chancellor Glasper, CC colleagues, and guests. It is my pleasure tonight to introduce Paradise Valley Community College's report on our innovative general assessment process. I too must acknowledge that this has been an important but long meeting, but I beg your patience to really focus on really what we're about, and that's teaching and learning. As a learning-centered college, we are driven by two fundamental questions. First, how does this course, program, service, budget decision, or process positively impact student learning? And secondly, how do we know? Gathering and using evidence of learning outcomes assessment is a critically important aspect of the Higher Learning Commission's process to reaffirm our accreditation. More importantly, it serves as a cornerstone to improve teaching, learning, and ultimately student success. Tonight's presentation will be made by our college's co-chair of our academic assessment team, Felicia Ramirez. Professor Ramirez is a graduate of Glendale Community College and holds a BA and MA in Communications from Arizona State University. At PVCC, she also serves on our Honors Faculty Advisory Committee and our HLC self-study serving team. She is passionate about outcomes assessment and has played a pivotal role in moving this agenda forward. Professor Ramirez?
President Burke, members of the board, Chancellor Glasper, members of CEC, and community guests, good evening to you all. It was so awesome to hear about those students and their comments, and I think it's appropriate that we followed that by moving this to a topic of learning and teaching. Can any of you recall a favorite assignment, maybe a project that asked you to dig a little deeper, maybe a topic that you hadn't learned anything about before, or you worked with some really fun classmates? Well, I'm going to ask you to take a different angle on that assignment tonight and to take the perspective of the teacher. So today I'll be sharing with you about our learning-centered assessment at PVCC, and I'll be talking to you about our assessment process, our GEA online tool, and how we strive to improve learning. You know, it takes a lot of work to make a great assignment and a learning activity, and we know that faculty are constantly engaged in observation and reflection in the classroom. And so we know that inspiration can come from many places. Faculty select a single area of learning to focus on, and this could be maybe we notice students struggling with a particular concept. Maybe we see that they're having difficulty applying a particular skill. We might focus on a competency for a course, or we could select a general education learning outcome. At PVCC, we have created 7 general education learning outcomes. Our umbrella or major outcome is critical thinking. The other 6 areas are diversity and global awareness, information literacy, oral communication, problem solving, technology, and written communication. We are also this semester working on adding critical reading to that list. So we have learned that assessment is more successful when it is processed that is clear, functional, and customizable. There is not a single right way of learning or teaching. And so we recognize that in the rubrics that we create for our general education learning outcomes,
serve as a menu, if you will, allowing faculty to select the learning dimensions that best fit the learning context. These rubrics help provide a set of the best practices, common general education language for us to use, and they reinforce general education skills across disciplines. So once we select a rubric that we want to focus on, I want to talk to you about another tool we created, which is our GEA, General Education Assessment online tool. So this web tool houses fillable assessment forms. It allows for data reporting and tracking, generates results, and it also displays completed assessment projects. So I'll proceed to highlight some of the features of this tool and how we use it. First off, using an assessment form, our faculty develop a plan. For example, psychology faculty might choose an oral communication rubric to improve students' presentations in the classroom, or science faculty might choose critical thinking rubric to assess students' ability to analyze case studies. These are just a couple of examples of the ways faculty employ this for their classroom. After implementing an assessment plan, our faculty record the data and they can get immediate results analysis. Our GEA online tool is connected to SIS, the Student Information System, so this means that GEA is automatically populated with classes and rosters each semester. So our faculty can simply log in, they select the general education learning outcomes they want to use, they select the individual dimensions, again as a menu from those rubrics, and then they enter their data for each student. After they enter this data, all faculty, RFP, and adjunct can then access immediate results. So they can get the data, and as we know, data can tell us many stories, different stories. And so, again, going with a customizable approach, faculty can choose which story they want to focus on. So, for example, GEA generates results by course, by term, by discipline, by the learning outcome, by participation, and even by class format. So again, lots of different stories, lots of different ways to use the data. Once we have this data, faculty can extrapolate the results and the way that makes the most sense to them and is most meaningful. Then we can have quality discussions. We can view each other's learning assessment completed projects and learn from each other. We can reflect on any changes that we want to make to the learning process, and we can therefore close the loop, leading to new observations and inspiration. Another way that faculty can expand their assessment projects is to participate on our CAT team, not the feline kind, but we're very proud of the rubric system in the GEA online tool. We also recognize the value of having a nationally normed assessment tool. So about 3 years ago, we started using the CAT test, Critical Thinking Assessment Test. It's developed by Tennessee Tech University and part of the NSF grant. The CAT test targets critical thinking skills that are valued by faculty and employers. PVCC faculty administer, and we also score the test, which is a pretty intensive process. Faculty involved also work to address critical thinking skills in a more purposeful way in their courses. We've seen some very positive results. This summer, we received news that PVCC's students scored higher than the national average for community colleges. They also scored higher for lower division four-year university students. So we're very pleased with those results. We're currently in the middle of a longitudinal study using CAT. So this evening I've shared with you just a snapshot of our learning-centered assessment at PVCC, from observation and inspiration to data tracking and analysis. GEA online tool is a positive way to capture some of the great work that our faculty are doing and the work that they're trying to improve learning and learning activities. So I'm very proud to report on behalf of my colleagues at PVCC, we are seeing evidence of a focus on learning, a constant improvement on learning, and a desire truly to work together to achieve these goals. So thank you for the opportunity to share this good news with all of you.
Thank you.
A question maybe for the Chancellor. Are other colleges using something similar to this?
There are different tools that colleges are using. I know they aren't using the same tool as this one.
I have a question. This sounds like a very same program. Is this mandatory, and what kind of training is involved, and is everybody doing it, or is it certain colleges? Or just,
Encore performance.
yeah, a whole bunch of questions come up.
So the question, I believe, was, is it mandatory?
Yes.
As a faculty person, I would say that no, I wouldn't call it mandatory per se. Maybe that's just my approach to it. I think, again, it's more successful when it's meaningful. And so we choose how we want to do assessment projects. Now, there are certain methodologies or certain process that I believe has to take place. For example, we agree as faculty to complete course assessment projects or general education projects. How we choose to implement that really is up to us. That was kind of, again, the customizable approach. But all of us, especially those who have to complete, for example, a faculty evaluation plan, which is in the midst of some changes right now, we know that we have to complete some projects. So in that sense, it is something that's mandatory to complete a project, but they can pick for us how they want to proceed with their assessment projects. So I don't know if Paul wants to add anything to that.
Well, I would just simply add is I think by the nature of the tool and the training that our academic assessment team does, it makes it very easy to use and makes it more convenient for them to complete gen ed assessment. It also allows us then to do that across all disciplines, and again, the fact that they can pick and choose parts of the rubric that are most germane to that particular subject gives us a more holistic evaluation. I would also add that it's certainly about sharing best practices, and that we're certainly open to sharing this tool with other Maricopa colleges, and it's been kind of a work in progress over the last 3 or 4 years at PVCC.
Does it, so I pick it and choose how I want to prove this class? Does it change what I'm being taught or how I'm teaching?
It's kind of difficult to explain in the time frame, but essentially, let's say that I want to help students learn a particular skill more effectively. Again, it's kind of based on discussions you might have. For example, English faculty are constantly seeing that writing skills is something that students struggle with, and one area in particular may be MLA formatting. And so as teachers are having conversations with their colleagues, they realize, gosh, our students there's a pattern that they're trying to work on this area. What can we do to help them? And so part of our written communication rubric has an MLA formatting dimension. So they pick that dimension to highlight, and as a division, they work together to create a particular assignment or activity that they would, in the classrooms, everyone share together with their students. And so then they look over the years, and they've seen positive results in the past couple of years of students doing better at learning MLA format because of what they're doing consistently in the classroom and the way they're teaching it. So the inspiration, again, comes from lots of different areas, and I think that's why we've been so successful, is because we allow faculty to be inspired by whatever they want to work on. Whatever project they see that best fits the needs in the classroom, that's what they choose. And so it changes their teaching in a way that they may be changing an approach, they may be adding a learning activity. But I'm hesitant to just look at it in terms of saying there's a problem and something's not being done right and therefore we're trying to fix it. That's not the correct perspective, I think. I think the perspective is we see an opportunity for us to constantly improve ourselves. And I think teachers are always doing that. You know, it's kind of a work that's never done. And so we provide the tools and resources to do that in a structured way and to capture evidence of that constant engagement that's going on with faculty.
I like the idea of several things. One, you've incorporated with SIS, which I think makes things a lot easier and have to retype everything.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it gives us confidence that the SIS system has really had its value more than what we actually maybe thought it was originally.
I'm glad I can do that.
But more importantly, I think if you compare it to what K-12 was looking at in the Common Core with the national ability to rank yourself and look at what other states are doing with their the fact that we can look at our community college students somewhat the same way. I realize it's not exactly the same, but it gives us a chance to make sure that we're on the same path as the rest of the world when it comes to community college level work.
Right. Absolutely, and I think that's the positive thing, is that if we have best practices as communication faculty, we're sharing with our colleagues what those best practices are, and their classes, they're being consistent with what we say is, you know, as experts in that area, good practice, and that's a great thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
One question. Do you see any application here for online courses, or is there a distinction between how Do you know any differences between online and actual face-to-face
We
classes?
we began a project this year. We recognize that that's an improving area. I teach classes online as well. And so we can now track our assessment projects by class format. That means that we will start generating results by in-class, hybrid, and online.
Do you think that's going to lead to perhaps indicating or coming up with some indicators of what online courses are more appropriate, what subjects are more appropriate for online than other courses?
I don't think so. I think that's a question for a different arena, perhaps. I think that this is more saying faculty who are teaching online and are doing assessment projects. If I'm in the class or I'm online, I'm constantly trying to look at what's happening in terms of learning and help my students more. And so I think that these tools can be used for any format, and I don't think they'll necessarily dictate which content is best. I think it just dictates how can I fix or how can I help students with this kind of learning and these kinds of concepts, no matter where you are.
Is there measurements of success? Are there
It'd be difficult again because we can use so many different ways. We're seeing increase in our sections that are being assessed. We see an increase in faculty participation. So at that level, we're seeing great news. We also look at different patterns from a big picture. For example, if we look at oral comm over the years, what skills are we trying to improve? Which activities are generating improvement? But it's more meaningful, I think, for the faculty themselves, the discussions they're having amongst each other. So for example, I look at by course my results, and I say, okay, maybe I did a pre-test and I did a treatment in the classroom, and then I look at the post-test and I see a difference. I see them doing better at same questions, better at critical thinking. And so for me, that's really powerful and meaningful. And then we just try to gather all the evidence of all that individual faculty work that's going on. That to me is the most powerful thing, to see the awesome stuff my colleagues are doing.
As a faculty, I can choose to do nothing, though?
I'm sorry?
As a faculty, I can choose to do nothing and not participate?
I'll let Paul answer that question.
Well, certainly we want to scale everything in Maricopa, and I think to improve teaching and learning, it's our expectation, and Vice President Mosley is in the audience also too, is that it is an expectation that part of the teaching and learning experience is to measure whether or not students are learning and to what degree they're learning. So I think it is our expectation that we engage faculty in a variety of ways to engage in assessment. Certainly the Higher Learning Commission requires that, but more importantly, the only way we know how to get better is to measure the effectiveness of what's happened, collectively share that information. So I'd like to say collectively within Maricopa, it is an expectation that all faculty engage in some form of assessment throughout their teaching and learning experience.
So that's a no?
It's a yes.
Well, Paul, no for now. And just a comment, I think it's the environment you create that will lead faculty to voluntarily participate, and I think that's the best scenario you can have on a campus. So, and I agree with you, assessments. It's always important to measure where your students are at a given time.
It's
Thank you.
a very important question, by the way, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
External community, AADGB report. I sent each of the board members a link to the program for the Arizona Commission of Post-Secondary Higher Education Conference in November 21, 22. Trustees from all 10 community colleges have been invited to that conference, and I encourage you to make plans to go to that, okay? ASBA report?
We've got a conference coming up mid-December. It's our annual ASBA conference, 2 days at Arizona Biltmore with much the same format we had at the law conference, with great breakout sessions and a chance to talk to our K-12 partners in education.
Great, thank you. Our next meeting dates, the first will be on November 12. We'll have an agenda review in the Rio Conference Center. And then that evening, the annual outcomes retreat at the Rio Conference Center. I want to alert the board, we may begin earlier that day for an executive session. We have some things to discuss. The meeting after that will be November 26. Again, an agenda review for the December board meeting, and then that evening on November 26, the regular board meeting. And these are open to all the public. We invite you to be there. This meeting is adjourned.